Hi, today we're going to talk about the data science behind the report, how efficient is the freight in your city. I'm here with the data scientist behind this report, Emily Porter. First, before getting this data, how does a data scientist think to get this kind of report?
Yeah, overarching question is how can we think about freight efficiency in urban areas? What does freight efficiency in urban areas even mean? And, to try to capture the complexity of that, I use the three components, the infrastructure readiness, infrastructure resilience, and infrastructure externalities. Not to say that those are the only three things that matter in terms of urban freight efficiency, but I do think they're three important factors. And so then it's like, okay, well, these are the questions that we have. What data do we have access to that can help answer these questions? And with idling, it's pretty straightforward because we can, we capture directly from the vehicles how long they're spending idling. But with some of the other metrics, for example, the infrastructure resilience, it's a little more complicated. So it's really, matching the questions that we have to the data that we have access to and trying to come up with something that makes sense and that's interpretable by people who haven't themselves dug into the data.
For resilience, you mean the ability of a city to respond to unexpected or sometimes expected events, but how do you route traffic around these things?
Exactly, yeah, and I'm so glad you said that because, there are expected events like sports games, concerts, conferences, but then there's unexpected events too, like big snowstorms, heavy rain, etc.
And you find a way to figure out when this happened and what the city did.
Yeah, exactly. So what I really try to look at first, how severe was the event? So was it a sports game or was it a big snowstorm? Those different types of events have pretty significantly different impacts on the transportation system. And then the second thing that I look at is how quickly does the system kind of recover from this abnormality and return back to normal operating behavior?
Let me choose one of the maps that I saw there, where you're comparing idling between Salt Lake City and cities like LA, Denver, New York. What do we see here?
Yeah, this was like one of the most interesting findings from the report, I think. So even though Salt Lake is quite a bit smaller than the other cities, the per vehicle average idling is actually higher, even higher than LA, higher than Denver, higher than New York.
So here in the report overall, Salt Lake City looks pretty good in terms of their numbers, except in idling.
Exactly.
And New York and LA have way less idling, even if they have more congestion.
Yeah, exactly. So that and this is like one of the things that emerges from the normalization. So, even though Los Angeles is geographically much larger than Salt Lake and therefore, home to way more big trucks than Salt Lake, if you're just looking on a per vehicle basis, the idling in Salt Lake is still worse. Not to say that there aren't a lot of positives associated with Salt Lake City's infrastructure, but idling is just one of those things that really stood out as something kind of uniquely high in Salt Lake.
What tools do you use next to create a report like this, to create maps like this?
Yeah, so I do most of my big data processing using Altitude by Geotab. That's where I really hone in on what specific data I want in terms of geography of interest, time period of interest, vehicle classes of interest, even like road classifications of interest. Like maybe I only want to look at primary roads and I don't want to look at tertiary roads, for example. So that's where I really kind of get the collection of telematics that I care about. And then from there, I usually move into a Jupyter notebook and use Python to, explore, make experimental plots, understand if there are relationships between variables, all those things.
What was your favorite finding or discovery from this process?
Well, I think one of the coolest things about it was just like coming up with these pretty simple metrics that capture the complexity of freight movement in urban areas and allow us to have like one final number that kind of showcases how efficient urban freight is in different areas. I just think it's really cool to reduce this huge amount of very complex information into simple, interpretable scores. So I think, yeah, that's one of the things I'm probably most proud of and just really liked working with throughout the report.
And you chose these 9 cities, but it could have been any other city. People are interested in their own city around North America. What should they do?
Yeah, totally. So, we chose 9 cities just to have something manageable to work with, and so that when we create these like resulting visualizations, it's not totally overwhelming. But altitude data covers all of North America, so anyone could look into freight movement in their city. It's totally not limited to the 9 that I looked at.
My personal question here is, hey, where is San Francisco? Why was San Francisco not one of those 9 cities?
Oh, okay, I knew you were going to ask this. So I'm not sure exactly why I didn't include it. I think one of the reasons is I live here, I know how bad the congestion is, and maybe I was scared to quantify it. But actually, there are a couple things that are specific to San Francisco that I'm interested in investigating in the coming weeks. One is I want to know if the Great Highway closure significantly impacted commercial vehicle movement in the area. And the second thing I'm curious about is when these big conferences take over downtown, what happens to commercial vehicle movement in the area? Like what's going on with all of those trucks that are trying to do their daily work when a big conference comes to town. So hopefully in a couple weeks we can get back together and talk more about that.
So the best part of this conversation for me is that it's only my first conversation with Emily. We're going to have a lot more conversations, so if you have any questions for her or for me, just leave it as a comment and we will address it in a future video. I really want to know what happens when a conference takes over my Howard Street. Thank you, Emily Porter. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm Felipe Hoffa and you are whoever you are, but I love that you joined us for this conversation. See you soon.